miracles are examples of right thinking. Through miracles, reality contact at all levels becomes strong and accurate, thus permitting correct delineation of intrapersonal and interpersonal boundaries. As a result, the doer sees the truth as God created it. This is what is meant by the principle on perceptive adjustment. A miracle is a correction factor introduced into false thinking by me. It acts as a catalyst, shaking up erroneous perception and snapping it into place. This correction factor places you under the enwandment principle, where your perception is healed. Until this has occurred, perception of the divine order is impossible. Through depth, perception becomes possible only at the highest order of perceptual integration. The spiritual eye is the mechanism of miracles, because what the spiritual eye perceives is true. The spiritual eye perceives both the creations of God and the products of human beings. Among the latter, it can also separate the truth from the false by its ability to perceive totally rather than selectively. It thus becomes the proper instrument for reality testing, which always involves the necessary distinction between the truth and the false. The miracle dissolves error, because the spiritual eye identifies error as false or unreal. This is the same as saying that by seeing light, darkness automatically disappears. Darkness is a lack of light. It does not have unique properties of its own. It is an example of the scarcity fallacy from which only error can proceed. Truth is always abundant. Scarcity leads to overeating and other false drives. Abundance eliminates these. Those who perceive and acknowledge that they have everything have no need for driven behavior of any kind. Miracles are a blessing from parents to children. This is just another way of phrasing the earlier principle about by those who have more for those who have less. Children do not belong to parents, but they do need share their parents' greater abundance. If they are deprived, their perception becomes distorted. When this occurs, the whole family of God, or the sonship, is impaired in its relationships. Ultimately, every member of the family of God must return. The miracle calls to him to return because it blesses and honors him even though he may be absent in spirit. The miracle acknowledges all men as your brothers and mine. It is a way of perceiving the universal mark of God in them. This is the true strawberry mark of brotherhood. Your false idea about your own exclusion from universal love is both fallacious and arrogant. Your real specialness does not stem from exclusion, but from inclusion. All my brothers are special. You should stop interpreting this as all except me. This is ridiculous. The implied lack of love that this version contains is way off the mark and misses the level of right thinking entirely. You must heal your perception in this respect. You must work a miracle on behalf of yourself here. See the principle about miracles as perception correctors before you can extend miracles as creative energizers, which they are. 50 million Frenchmen can be wrong, because the notion is too fragmented. What can't be wrong is the universal sonship, of which you are a part. God is not mocked, may arouse anticipation of punishment, but it is really a reassurance. God would be mocked if any of his creations lacked holiness. The creation is whole. The mark of wholeness is holiness, not holes. The sonship has no holes anywhere. Remember, God is not mocked under any circumstances. Wholeness is the perceptual content of the miracle. It thus corrects or atones for the faulty perception of lack. We can now return to the fundamental distinction between miracles and projection. The stimulus must precede the response and must also determine, or at least influence, the kind of response that is evoked. The relationship of stimulus and response is extremely intimate. The behavioristic terminology is because this part deals with behavior. Behavior is response, so the question, response to what, becomes crucial. Stimuli of all kinds are identified through perception. You perceive the stimulus and behave accordingly. It follows then that, as ye perceive, so will ye behave. Consider the golden rule again. You are asked to behave toward others as you would have them behave toward you. This means that your perception of both must be accurate, since the golden rule is the order for appropriate behavior. You can't behave appropriately unless you perceive accurately, because appropriate behavior depends on lack of level confusion. The presence of level confusion always results in variable reality testing, and hence in variability in behavioral appropriateness. All forms of debasing your self-image are fundamental perceptual distortions. They inevitably produce either self-contempt or projection onto others, and usually both. Since you and your neighbor are equal members of the same family, as you perceive both, so will you behave toward both. The way to perceive for golden rule behavior is to look out from the perception of your own holiness and perceive the holiness of others. Note the very old Jewish practice of changing the name of a person who is very ill, so that when the list is given to the angel of death, the person with that name will not be found. This was actually a distortion of a revelation about how to alter or avert death. The revelation's proper content was that those who change their mind, not name, about destruction or hate do not need to die. Death is a human affirmation of a belief in hate. That is why the Bible says there is no death, and that is why I demonstrated that death does not exist. Remember that I came to fulfill the law by reinterpreting it. The law itself, if properly understood, offers only protection. It is those who have not yet changed their minds who have entered the hellfire concept into it. Remember, I said before that just because nature abhors a vacuum, it does not follow that the vacuum is filled with hellfire. The emptiness engendered by fear should be replaced by love, because love and its abundance are in the same dimension, and true correction cannot be undertaken except within a dimension. Otherwise, there has been a confusion of levels. You need considerable clarification of the channel role. If you are asked somebody what he believes before you tell him what you believe, then you are implying that you will say what he approves. This is not the real authority. The right way to complete the sentence, "When they told me what to do," is, I referred the question to the only real authority. The Bible says, "To everyone then who gives witness to me before man, I will give witness before my Father in heaven. The quotation means that you represent or witness for the authority in whom you believe. Your witnessing demonstrates your belief and thus strengthens it. I assure you that I will witness for anyone who lets me, and to whatever extent he himself permits it. Those who witness for me are expressing through their miracles that they have abandoned deprivation in favor of abundance they have learned belongs to them. A major contribution of miracles is their strength in releasing a person from his misplaced sense of isolation, deprivation, and lack. They are affirmations of sonship, which is a state of completion and abundance. The emphasis on changing your mind needs further clarification. Whatever is true and real is eternal and cannot change or be changed. The spirit is therefore unalterable because it is already perfect, but the mind can elect the level it chooses to serve. The only limit which is put on its choice is that it cannot serve two masters. While the ballot itself is a secret one, and the right to vote is fully protected, voting always entails both election and rejection. If two candidates are voted for the same position, the machine cancels the ballot automatically. This is necessary because a split vote does not represent any real alliance. Free will is the attribute of the mind, not the spirit. The spirit always remains changeless, because it never leaves the sight of God. The creation of the spirit is already fully accomplished. The mind, if it votes to do so, becomes a medium by which the spirit can create along the lines of its own creation. If it does not freely elect to do so, it retains this creative ability, but places itself under tyrannous rather than authoritative control. As a result, what it makes is imprisonment, because such are the dictates of tyrants. To change your mind means to place it at the disposal of true authority. The miracle is thus a sign that the mind has elected to be guided by Christ in his service. The abundance of Christ is the natural result of choosing to follow him. The following is in relation to the question of sex. You are involved with unconscious distortions which are producing a dense cover over miracle impulses, making it hard for them to reach consciousness. Sex and miracles are both ways of relating. The nature of any interpersonal relationship is limited or defined by what you want it to do, which is why you want it in the first place. Relating is a way of achieving an outcome. Indiscriminate sexual impulses result in body image misperceptions. This is an expression of an indiscriminate attempt to reach communion through the body. This involves not only improper self-identification, but also disrespect for the individuality of others. Self-control is not the whole answer to this problem, though I am by no means discouraging its use. It must be understood, however, that the underlying mechanism must be uprooted, a word you should understand well enough by now not to regard it as frightening. All shallow roots have to be uprooted, because they are not deep enough to sustain you. The illusion that shallow roots can be deepened, and thus made to hold, is one of the corollaries on which the reversal of the golden rule, referred to twice before, is balanced. As these false underpinnings are uprooted or given up, equilibrium is experienced as unstable. but the fact is that nothing is less stable than an orientation which is upside down. Anything that holds it that way is hardly conducive to greater stability. The whole danger of defenses lies in their propensity to hold misperceptions rigidly in place. This is why rigidity is regarded as stability by those who are off the mark. A rigid orientation can be extremely reliable, even if it is upside down. In fact, the more consistently upside down it is, the more reliable it is. One of the more horrible examples of inverted or upside down thinking, and history is full of horrible examples of this, was the Nazis' final solution. I shed many tears over this, but it is by no means the only time I said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." All actions which stem from reversed thinking are literally the behavioral expressions of those who know not what they do. Actually, Jean Dixon was right in her emphasis on feet on the ground and fingertips in heaven. Although she was too literal for some, many people knew exactly what she meant, so her statement was the right miracle for them. I submit that if a mind is in valid relationship with God, it can't be upside down. Many have lost sight of the end and are concentrating on the means. Remember the story about the artist who kept devoting himself to inventing better and better ways of sharpening pencils. He never created anything, but he had the sharpest pencil in town. The sexual language here is intentional. Sex is often utilized on behalf of very similar errors. Hostility, triumph, vengeance, self-debasement, and all sorts of expressions of the lack of love are often very clearly seen in the accompanying fantasies. But it is a profound error to imagine that because these fantasies are so frequent or occur so reliably, this implies validity. You can be wholly reliable and entirely wrong. Intellect may be a displacement upward, but sex can be a displacement outward. How can you come close to others through the parts of you which are really invisible? The word invisible means cannot be seen or perceived. What cannot be perceived is hardly the right means for improving perception. The confusion of miracle impulse with sexual impulse is a major source of perceptual distortion, because it induces, rather than straightens out, the basic level confusion which underlies all those who seek happiness with the instruments of the world. A desert is a desert is a desert. You can do anything you want in it, but you cannot change it from what it is. It still lacks water, which is why it is a desert. The thing to do with a desert is to leave. Miracles arise from a miraculous state of mind. This state of mind goes out to anyone, even without the awareness of the miracle worker himself. The impersonal nature of miracles is because the at-one-ment itself is one. By being one, it unites all creations with their creator. The miracle is an expression of an inner awareness of Christ and acceptance of his at-one-ment. The mind is then in a state of grace and naturally becomes gracious, both to the host within and the stranger without. By bringing in the stranger, he becomes your brother. The miracle of healing is to bring those who are estranged from each other together, because they are estranged from God. The miracles you are told not to perform have not lost their value. They are still expressions of your own state of grace. But the action aspect of the miracle should be Christ-controlled, because of his complete awareness of the whole plan. The impersonal nature of miracle-mindedness ensures your own grace, but only Christ is in a position to know where grace can be bestowed.